Here's my definition of courage. A person behaves courageously when he or she chooses a course of action based upon a certain set of values or ideals against immense pressure to follow an alternative. Therefore, courage is doing what is right when urged to do what is wrong. It is doing what is hard when you want to take the easy way out. It is telling the truth when you are tempted to lie. So courage can take different forms. The most obvious ones that we point to are examples that I've already given, where soldiers run into battle and they go towards action and they sacrifice themselves for their comrades or brothers or nation, wherever it might be. These are the types of courage that we often label as valor or bravery. But there are also other types of courage. There is the type of courage like we see in George Washington. Before he was President Washington, whenever he was General Washington, leading the Revolutionary Army through the War for Independence, and against all the setbacks and against all the opposition and against all the failures and many battles that they lost, he continued on. Every time he was tempted to quit, instead, he continued on, so that one of his contemporaries described him as possessing, quote, a cabinet of fortitude. Fortitude, endurance, perseverance. These are other forms of courage that we might see displayed in life. They're the types of courage that continue on. We could also consider Wilberforce, who gave his entire career and all of his adult life to fighting the slave trade and the institution of slavery in the British Empire, only to see it finally abolished literally a few days before his death. And all those times that he was tempted to give up and to move on and try something else, instead, he continued on. Endurance and fortitude. Moral courage, we might add to that as well. So understanding what courage is, what this virtue is, here's something that I want us to understand. That the Bible calls Christians to live with courage. It's one of the virtues that I don't believe we teach nearly often enough. We talk about many of the other virtues, and we talk about many of the other commandments and lifestyles which we are called to in Scripture, and yet we overlook this one, which we are called to again and again and again throughout the Bible. Just consider this. We follow a courageous king who faced death himself at Gethsemane and Calvary. G.K. Chesterton, whenever he reflected on Jesus' own courage, he said this: "Alone of all creeds, Christianity has added courage to the virtues of the Creator. For the only courage worth calling courage must necessarily mean that the soul passes a breaking point and does not break." Moreover, the Bible is full of exhortations for us to, sometimes it says to be strong and courageous, or at other points it says to take heart, another type of phrase which means to take courage. Let me just give you a few. And I mean a few because there are a few examples. In Joshua 1:9, God says to his people, "Haven't I commanded you, be strong and courageous? Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." In John 16:33, Jesus says, "I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. You will have suffering in this world. Be courageous. I have conquered the world." In 1 Corinthians 15:58, Paul says, "Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, be steadfast." Remember another one of these iterations we see of courage. "Be steadfast, immovable, always excelling in the Lord's work, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain." These are just the examples and the exhortations towards courage that we see in the Scripture. If we consider Christian history, then there are thousands of more examples. Just consider a few of these from the Bible or Christian history. Think of Moses' mother hiding her son from Pharaoh. This nameless woman that we have in Scripture. We never have a name for her. It's just his mother. But this nameless woman in Scripture defied a tyrant, and through her actions, a nation achieved their freedom, was given their freedom, their liberty. How incredible is that? Through her bravery. Joshua leading Israel to the promised land in spite of the opposition they faced. David defeating Goliath. Daniel's three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who defied King Nebuchadnezzar's command to idolatry and instead thought it was better to face the furnace. Daniel himself, who instead of just closing his window in order to pray, thought it would be better to face the lion's den. In the New Testament, think of Peter and John testifying before the Sanhedrin. Consider Paul, as I talked about before, in his seafaring journeys, as he roused the sailors to take heart and to continue to row and to persevere in the heart of the storm.